Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark, and today I am joined by guest Yuval Yeret. Yuval, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good to be here.
Today we are going to talk about the status of Agile as a platform and what to do with platform specializations if you want to pivot. But first, Yuval, could you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
In my background, I'm an engineer, developer. I've been in engineering leadership for a while, and I discovered the Agile world back in 2006. And after spending some time bringing using Agile to improve my own engineering product organization, I switched over to the dark side of consulting and coaching and helped other organizations, other leaders like me, drive change in their organization and improvement using agile techniques. So I've been in this space for a while. If you do the numbers, I've
hmm
seen it rise to popularity. I see it cross the chasm, you might say. And, you know,
hmm
and your notes, uh, your recent emails about platform specialization have definitely been interesting to think about from the perspective of what's going on in the agile world. So,
So that was almost 20 years ago when you sort of discovered Agile. What was Agile like back then? What was to the extent that you were aware of it as a platform? You used it as a tool, and then what happened?
yeah. So even back then, agile was an industrial complex of sorts, as we call it these days. There
hmm
was a certification industry. You know, I looked at different things. I read some books, but eventually, one important thing that I've done is I went into a classroom for 2 days and learned from a certified Scrum trainer and became a certified Scrum master. There was a secret handshake, and I left the room being certified to master Scrum and go make my organization agile. You can probably notice the cynicism as part of that, because what can you do after 2 days? But that was that industry. The people leading, the agile world figured out a way to commercialize it by focusing on roles that created a lot of success and mass adoption for this industry, because there was a clear thing people could do to jump on the agile bandwagon to join the platform.
hmm
But I think if we close full circle to what's going on today, some of what happened with the roles and the certification is coming back to haunt us. But we can talk
Interesting.
about that.
Yeah. So okay, and at that time you were in house, right? You were in house at an
Yeah,
organization
I
that
was a
accepted
VP
training.
engineering for
Okay,
a small technology startup.
makes sense. Okay, and then what was that the knowing the secret handshake? Is that what inspired you to go solo? What was, or did you see the trainer and like, ooh, that seems like a good job? Like, do you remember what sort of prompted you to go out on your own?
Yeah, the main thing that prompted it was that I noticed that over several leadership positions that I held, in the 2000s, the early 2000s, my interest turned more and more to optimizing the organization and less so to optimizing code.
hmm
And it felt like being focused on, I mean, there's a limit to how much you can do that as a VP engineering of an organization.
hmm
Um, that was my take at the time.
Yep.
You could argue about that, but in the sort of organizations that I was in, it was a very interesting opportunity to go and impact more organizations, spread the raspberry jam over more organizations from the outside.
Okay, so that makes sense. And you did that in what? How long? What year was that you went solo?
I didn't really go solo. I joined a firm,
Okay.
a coaching firm. That was 2009,
Okay.
and I've done that until 2022, essentially. So at one point, I opened a branch of that firm here in the US.
Hmm.
It was originally in Israel, and I went truly solo 3 years ago. A
Sort of
lot
been.
of billable hours, as you might imagine.
Yeah. And in that period, what combination of things were you doing? Was it just training? Was it a combination of coaching and training, or what was it?
Yeah, initially it was mostly coaching, advisory work, helping teams, helping leaders like me before navigate this space of what should we actually do, what does it make sense to do, who should be in which roles. I I helped bring an approach that was more evolutionary in nature and required less of the what you might call these days the process overhead into the clients I was working with. We used more Kanban and flow and less emphasis on being prescriptive with Scrum. I started over time to scale that to training.
Hmm.
So I built some classes. I started to teach, more formal classes. And over the years, I guess it was a mix of 30% training, let's say 70% consulting, advisory, coaching work.
Okay. And so now, a- as things changed over the year, we've sort of alluded to the fact that things are different now than they were in 2006, 2009. What has been the evolution of the agile industrial complex, as you called it?
Yeah. What happened over the years is I wasn't one of the first people to go agile back in 2006, but I was still, I would call it part of the early bunch, the early adopters. In the 20 years that passed, agile has become mainstream, you might call it, for most of corporate America, technology organizations and product companies. And this created a reality where the organizations that are currently adopting agile are the late adopters. If you read, Jeffrey Moore,
Yeah.
the cousin, they need a full solution. They don't want to think too much about how to do this. Some of them, the laggards, are doing it just because it's, we're decommissioning waterfall at this point. Nobody knows how to use it.
Sunsetting.
Yeah, sunsetting waterfall. And, you know, there, this this created this pattern, which I call the agile theater,
Mm.
which is essentially just give me the easiest thing to do so that I could say that I'm agile. It's like, I don't know, to use the technology world. It's like I would need to go to the cloud.
Hmm.
So let's lift and shift our application and put it on the cloud. Is
Hmm.
that really going to help a lot with, the things we're looking for the cloud to solve? I don't know, but if we all we're doing is trying to go to the cloud in order to say that we're in the cloud, then maybe that's good enough.
Right.
We'll worry about the Amazon, Google, cloud costs afterwards.
Uh,
And that is happening in the agile world. People are slapping names like Scrum Master and Sprint and user story and daily Scrum and different and product owners, different terms on the way that they've been doing things already, and it's like slap, lipstick on a pig.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really creating any impact other than a bad name for Agile
Yeah.
and a bad name for people in these roles.
Uh-huh.
And that created an environment where the early adopters for 2006 and
Mm-hmm.
even later, they think this is a joke. They don't see value in anything that touches Agile. Agile has become toxic to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it creates this sort of dynamic where people are starting to push for, let's call it, post Agile ideas like a product operating model. And they're starting to talk about, Agile has created a feature factory. You need to go beyond the feature factory to become an empowered product organization, which is true. It makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And a lot of people in the trenches of the Agile world, people that chose to jump on the bandwagon and become practitioners,
Mm-hmm.
both, and it's slightly different stories, but both internally in organizations as well as externally, they're finding themselves on a burning platform, to use your metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because we use the burning platform metaphor, for change management as well. The reason some organizations went into Agile is because their previous things didn't work.
Yep.
But a lot of organizations went into Agile just because of FOMO.
Right. Yeah. So so a couple of things to just call out for the listener. That's the book, Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, is what you were referring to, and the early adopters all the way to the laggards, and it sort of goes through the mainstream on the way there. And this happens regularly with successful platforms of all types. It's certainly not limited to Agile. I mean, the book is about a product reaching sort of mass adoption, or whatever you call it, whatever he calls it. Um, in the platform space, just to give some background on the emails that you referred to, the platform space, it can be very, very beneficial to a practitioner to be an early adopter on a platform that does end up crossing the chasm and reaching mass adoption, and then eventually tailing out to the people who don't really want to do it, but they're kind of forced, or it's FOMO, and they don't really care, and they're not going to do it, air quotes, the right way. And what happens when so I talk in the emails about two different reasons why you might end up wanting to jump off the platform specialization that you have. And one of them is that the platform is so successful that too many people jump on the bandwagon and they just like pollute the whole area. The terms become meaningless because they don't really understand them. They're just saying them. It's theater. They're just saying the lines without really understanding what's behind it. And in the other way that the other way is that the platform just never crosses the chasm. It has like a real good ramp up with early adopters, and people seem to get really excited about it, but then some new shiny object comes along and it doesn't last that long. So mobile was definitely like this for me. Like a lot of the things that you just said, I remember getting to the laggards when they were just like, we need mobile responsive, and I was just like, I was like, okay, this is over. Like, people are asking for something, they don't even understand what they're asking for. It's just a checkbox that they have to report to their board of directors or something. I don't know what the actual motivation was, but even mobile, which was the most widely adopted technology of all time, eventually tails out. Eventually it reaches everyone, or it just fails.
It becomes a commodity,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right. And you get all of these early adopters. I mean, sorry, you get these late adopters that jump on the bandwagon, and they're younger. They don't have as many wives and kids and dogs, or spouses, kids and dogs, and they undercut you, and they make a bad name for the platform. All of these things happen. And eventually, I guess it's sort of a natural life cycle for a platform to go through one of these things, but eventually they don't. It's hard to think of one that lasts indefinitely in a way that's beneficial to people like us who are platform specialists. Okay, so there's a little bit of background there. It's not just Agile; it's everything really. If you have a platform specialization, I didn't say the good part. The good part, just briefly, is at the beginning, you don't have to do any marketing because you're one of the early people, and the platform is taking off, so they have money to spend, and clients are throwing money at them, and then they distribute the money to the platform. Usually have different names for them, but like some kind of experts. In your case, was certified Scrum masters or instructors into the certification program. But whatever it is, you get a huge business benefit early on because the platform itself is attracting clients for you. So keeping an eye peeled for when it starts to get into the laggards is a good idea. Or like if you go to a conference for the platform, like an agile conference, and everyone is half your age, it starts to be like, okay, we might be to the bandwagon stage. Okay. So how, you're just one person. How many agile practitioners do you think there are? Like people that are, let's say, certified. Are we talking hundreds of
I
thousands?
think it's hundreds of thousands of people that have been certified at this point.
Okay. So quite a
Um,
few.
yeah,
And you're just one. So like how prevalent is this idea? Like, are you way, way early to recognize that uh, things, not all is well, or is it just the early
no, I mean,
adopters?
if you the meme around Agile being dead is going around. The religious wars between the product operating model gang and the Agile gang, it's going around. I think it's pretty much out there.
Hmm.
The There's concrete data about certification market demand going
Hmm.
down dramatically, and it's not just the economy. It seems
Hmm.
there are multiple things that are happening. It's like a perfect storm.
Yeah.
It's both. The way it feels to me, it's both what's going on in the life cycle of Agile. It's people want a different learning experience. People are spending less on enablement roles.
Mm.
The whole the biggest issue with Agile, I think, or I see, is the over reliance on specific roles in organizations. And
Hmm.
I wrote last year or 2 years ago, even, I think, about the future of agility is not, or at least shouldn't be, the future of agile roles. In I mean, if you go back, way back, to my organization in 2006, I was the VP engineering. I learned Scrum Mastery.
Yep.
Leaders, the team leads, the engineering managers in my organization, they learned about it, and we did it. We didn't bring in dedicated people to do it. Many of my clients, that's my recommendation to them over the years, that the people that should be applying mastery of Agile should be the leaders in your organization.
Hmm.
That's not the model that big consulting firms use. That's not
Right.
the model that works for, staffing agencies that want to bring you, dedicated people to do this. And there are other reasons why there were a lot of dedicated Scrum Masters and other roles in organizations. And now that is coming to an end.
Yeah.
There are fewer and fewer organizations that feel like this is worthwhile. Um, it's a whole interesting conversation. The relationship between what do you really expect I mean, would you expect as a consultant to work with one team forever or even for years? Or does it make more sense for you to hop in between organizations and help them in a very specialized or more nuanced manner,
Hmm.
which makes more sense to me,
Right.
and is different than the classic agile approach.
Hmm. Okay. So what are you seeing the sort of, especially the early adopters, the people that sort of see the writing on the wall and saw it early? what are those folks doing in terms of pivoting their business? Are they just like aging out and retiring?
Some of them made a killing, um, training people through you know,
Hmm.
the the bowling alley years of the model, and they can they can retire and count their Teslas. Um, there there are people that are hunkering down for you know years of change, trying to look at what's the new training modality, what's the new modality of people learning, of people getting help. Um, like I'm specifically looking at, okay, how can I work effectively with people that don't necessarily want to bring in a consultant. They would a mastermind of people that want to focus on agility be useful to these people? Is it community-based courses rather than live cohorts? I don't know. There are a lot of pivots to consider, and a lot of the serious people in this space, especially the, let's call it, the external players, are doing this. I think it's a lot of the people that were internal are scrambling, like
Hmm.
they don't know what to do.
Oh, right.
They
People that aren't consultants. They're like
Yeah,
employees.
people that were scrum masters or even agile coaches or
Hmm.
other, let's call it, dedicated agile roles inside organizations.
Hmm.
they're they're scrambling to find what to do. Do they find
That's
another
an
role,
yeah.
or do they go back to what they were doing before, or do they take on other enablement roles that don't have an agile name? There are a lot of things that those people are considering right now.
So that's a very interesting way to think. Like, so let's think about this angle from the internal employee standpoint. So I usually don't think about that. And presumably, you tell me because I'm just going to guess at a whole bunch of stuff and then you can correct me. Presumably, the scrum master, let's say, that's in house at where IBM or something like, uh, they're
IBM
at
is a technology company and a consulting company. Let's go for, I don't know, Bank of Providence.
okay,
I know
Bank of
that's not a
Providence.
bank. I assume that's
Yes,
not a bank, but let's use
no,
that rather
Old
than
Stone,
one of the
old,
big ones.
yeah. So I'm a scrum master at Bank of Providence. I'm an employee,
Hmm.
and I've got this title that is no longer attractive. But this is where I'm going to start guessing. But that's just a label on the activities that I do. And one would think that my manager or my boss or whoever would see some value in the activities that I'm doing if they're providing value. And that my title happens to be Scrum Master would be irrelevant in terms of my job security because the boss knows that whatever you call it, this person is making things run more smoothly or helping things run more smoothly. Now, is the title so poison that that doesn't matter?
Yes.
Wow.
And um, let's rewind a bit.
Hmm.
The Bank of Providence
Yeah.
chose to go agile because of FOMO.
Okay.
McLeod, DeKinsey, you know, whoever they're working with,
Convince
convince
them.
them that they need to be agile, right? And trainers like me maybe made some good money on training a lot of people in that organization. The neither the organization or a lot of the scrum masters, unfortunately, are asking themselves why why are we here? Why are we really here? What's the real outcome?
Okay. They're doing
The
they're
I
doing
mean, there's
theater.
there's a lot of, yeah, they're doing the theater, and although they're not billing hours, they're doing hours,
Hmm.
and the organization is waking up to see that there's not enough value in these hours. It's become, you know, it's become too much of a theater that's not connected to real outcomes.
Yep.
So
Which is so
organizations
ironic.
these days, yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah.
um, so my advice, to be honest, to I mean, there are different situations. One context is it's too late. The Bank of Providence decided to cut all of its, agile roles, and all of these people will enjoy the unemployment policies of the great state of Rhode Island for a while, and we'll look for other organizations where they can do this.
Hmm.
The the other situation is that the Bank of Providence is starting to ask some tough questions around why should we do this, or that those Scrum Masters or any people in that role will learn from what we need to do as consultants and focus on evidence, on outcomes.
Yeah.
Have that why conversation. There's this Netflix, I don't know if you talked about it, but there's this Netflix question where people are in people managers are encouraged to have a conversation with their employees once in a while. How hard will you fight for me to stay here if I decided to go somewhere else?
So the employee asked the manager, their own manager, this.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Why is
It's a
that called
conversation that they should have.
why is
I
that
need to
called the
look it up
Netflix question?
because Netflix, use that
Oh, they do
practice.
this.
They
I
talk
see.
about it. Yeah, they do. They talk about it in the book about the Netflix culture.
Gotcha.
I can
Okay.
look up the reference.
Yeah.
It's a very pointy question to ask. It's
Hmm.
a version of your
Right.
why conversation
Yes.
for an internal employee. I think a lot of people in the agile space would be frightened to ask this question right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But they should start with asking it themselves.
Hmm.
They should start with for themselves thinking, what do I need to do that doesn't rely on my title to be here, that will provide value? How can I connect what I'm doing to evidence, to expensive problems?
Hmm.
And hopefully that can help them get off the platform of Agile and
Right.
start to be useful.
Right. I mean, this is just general good employee advice across the board. And really anyone who's accepting money from someone, you should be trying to provide a positive ROI in a recognizable format. So the difference here, or sort of the thing that makes it extra painful or widespread, is that there's a label on all of these people that, rightly or wrongly, is, according to what you're saying, is sort of getting, is now toxic or frowned upon. And it's just like, to get rid of all of the agile people, and it's easy to find them because it's right in their title. And maybe it's too broad of a brush, because maybe some people were doing really delivering outcomes, but it becomes a bad sign or whatever. This is what happens when platforms flip. It's like it turns from a good thing into either the old way or the way that doesn't actually work or whatever, and it ends up, the bad name starts coming around.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know the details of the mobile um, platform bandwagon, and it will be interesting to see what happens with Gen AI in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But at least in the Agile space, it's not just that Agile has become a commodity and you don't need these people. It's not just that we solved all of the problems and everybody you know, has a great mobile responsive site or a great agile team that's able to deliver value. The whole reason for the rise of the product operating model is that there are a lot of agile theaters, there are a lot of product theaters and feature factories, and people aren't really driving work around outcomes and why. The irony is like multi-layered here. But the the question that I think we as agile practitioners, the agile community, leaders in this community, and I see myself as a leader in this community at some level,
Hmm.
we we need to ask ourselves, how have we been complicit in creating this condition?
Hmm.
And I think we have, in a way, both as leaders and as well as practitioners. We've created this reality where we are considered overhead and not value add.
Mm.
It might be too late to do something about it for Agile. It might not be too late.
Hmm.
But
Well, we're,
there's,
we're
I
still
think that's a
sunsetting
question each
waterfall, so.
individual. Yeah, yes. Each individual should probably, I mean, it's a question I think individuals should start asking themselves. How have I been complicit and what can I do about it to
Hmm.
create a different reality?
Yeah, so I can chime in with a little anecdote there that would perhaps give some people hope if if that's warranted. But like when I was in 2000, from 2001 ish, early 2000s, for about 4 or 5 years, I was specialized on a platform called FileMaker, and and by the time I got to, I got bored with it. It's a very, it's not a huge, it's not an endless area to learn. It's not that big of a product, and you can learn all of it pretty much on a given version. And so I was getting bored of it, but also I felt like the platform company was making decisions that I just wholeheartedly disagreed with, because back then the web was nothing. Well, it was starting to show signs of being what it was going to turn into. But I was like, the web, this is not a web technology, inherently not a web technology, and I was like, they should be making decisions to go more in that direction, and they weren't. So I was like, all right, this platform's dead. There's no way it's going to survive. And so uh, because of that and just being bored, I did like a half pivot into web stuff, and I started doing like projects that involved both FileMaker and some kind of web component, because it was horrible at the time. It was horrible with any kind of even small web scale. It was too slow. And so I started learning LAMP stack and MySQL and all that stuff in PHP. And pivoted, pivoted into mobile when that happened a couple of years later, and that went great. But FileMaker's still around, and I still have friends who make tons of money doing FileMaker development. And you could argue that it's kind of like, well, maybe the talent pool of people who do it professionally as a consultant has gone down because people haven't been getting back on. Like the bandwagon was over for years. It's been 20 years since I left. So maybe now like COBOL developers can make tons of money if you can find one. So it could just be a supply and demand thing. I'm not saying that'll happen with Agile, but if the bandwagon people, if a whole bunch, let's just say a whole bunch of bandwagon people jump ship en masse, like lemmings, see ya, I'm out of here. This was a mistake. All of a sudden, for the people who um, for the clients who do still care about it, and perhaps are doing it correctly and getting benefit out of it, maybe there'll be a resurgence of demand. I wouldn't bet on it, but these things, and the joke about we're still sunsetting waterfall. It's like this could last for, it could be a long, slow decline. It really depends on it's. I mean, it comes down to supply and demand. But what's for sure is the early years, the rocket launch of the early years won't come back. There's no way that's coming back. So, I don't know if there's a silver lining in there anywhere, but it could take longer. That the sort of doomsday. I was a total chicken little about FileMaker. I was like, anybody who wanted to hear about it, I was like, this thing is dead. It's never going to survive this, you know. And it's totally, I mean, we're on version 36 or something now. It's like an established technology that runs lots of businesses. It's a little bit different situation than Agile, because Agile is a process. It's not how, well, I guess we don't need to go into that. I guess I'd be more interested to find out from you, where do you think the product operating model is the sort of new hotness, and then that'll have a 20-year run, and then that'll cross the chasm and go to the laggards, and people will be like, oh,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about a 20-year run. I don't know that it has enough meat on the bones for what it is compared to, I mean, what it adds on top of Agile. The way I look at it um, recently is it's building on the shoulders of giants. The product operating model is not a totally new thing. If you come to an organization that somehow got stuck in waterfall and just left the cave, they would struggle a lot to implement a product operating model.
uh,
There's only a chance to make the transition reasonable because you are a feature factory. A feature factory is better than an agile theater. It's better
yeah,
than what I had in my organization in 2006. Becoming a feature factory was progress. So
hmm,
I my hope is that after the toxicity that we're going through, organizations will realize, yeah, it's not that agility isn't relevant anymore. It's just, a different shape, a different form, a different way to activate and instantiate it. We don't need each team to have a role that focuses on facilitating this process.
hmm,
Like we will learn that we don't need a daily scrum, let's say, to manage all of the work, but we might need a different way for people to actually get together and hash through some stuff.
hmm,
Those shifts would happen. I think the bottom line is we will have a significantly smaller number of people that dedicate their career to something like Agile, whatever it's called.
hmm,
You will need to specialize. You will need to start to think like consultants need to start to think and build your solar system. What are you focused on? Where are you really valuable?
hmm, yeah,
Make sure that you can talk clearly about what you help people do, and not just say I am a scrum master.
yeah, and let
Not
them
just I
connect the dots.
facilitate the daily scrum, but what is it that I help you know people deliver magic together. Whatever it is, I'm the glue
Yeah,
that makes teams work.
yeah,
In parallel, which is another silver lining promising thing, is I do see companies that are not the classic corporate America technology organization just getting into this space. Whether it's the Gillettes of the world that are using agile techniques to design razors
hmm,
more collaboratively and with faster, feedback loops. Whether it's biotech firms in the Boston area that are just starting to figure out how to do this, how to leverage these techniques, and will need specialized help,
hmm,
or whether it is, you know, um, I was just chatting with somebody, swimming schools, small private equity backed organizations that have a technology organization that is smaller, that haven't gone through the buzz and the FOMO of the larger organizations. They're still working on these things. I
hmm,
know you talked about your experience with credit unions in the
yeah,
past.
yeah,
Credit unions are agile already, but most of them, but there's still more and more organizations that would do this. You don't have to go for the Bank of America and Capital One and do agile there.
right.
So
One of the things that I talk about in terms of like what are your options when you pivot, or what are your options when you're on a platform that has either reached the bandwagon stage and you're just getting undercut, there's too much supply, or the platform is genuinely in decline, or both. What can you do? And And for people who have been doing it for a long time and have, as consultants, and a dead giveaway is if they get rehired and referred by past clients, it means they did something right. So whatever you label it, you've been doing something right. Even though I might say, "Oh, I'm a FileMaker expert," and they're like, "We have FileMaker, we like it, we need it, and it has some problems. Could you fix it?" So okay, and then if FileMaker disappeared, there are tons of skills that I developed in that capacity around just like they're basically, I didn't know this at the time, but they're basically product skills, like talking to the end users and understanding what their actual use cases are, and like prioritizing features based on low hanging fruit and all of these things. And I didn't know that. And so one there's two things that I'm going to tell you. One thing is that you can focus more on, for people that are actually not doing theater, people who have been delivering value, and you can tell because you get rehired or referred. Those people might be able to sort of deconstruct or just sort of remove the agile carapace off of their actual skills and sell those. So like organizational change management has been a thing since there have been organizations. So like, okay, but that's very general, sort of horizontal capability that benefited at one time from having the agile label wrapped up in an agile wrapper. Now the wrapper's gross, so we don't want that wrapper anymore. So people could pivot to just the outcomes of the underlying thing. So like I help you ship features faster. Like I help you crank through your backlog. I help you have fewer show-stopping bugs in production. Whatever the outcomes are that you have delivered to clients in the past, focus on the outcomes and sell the outcomes. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is, even if you don't take the wrapper off, um, looking back over your past clients and saying like, you know what, I really feel like I delivered a lot of value with my biotech clients, or one particular biotech client, or one bank or credit union, whatever. One or two, maybe it'd be great if you had three clients that are in a sector, there's something similar about them. And you're like, okay, I'm going to specialize in those. And then decide whether or not you're going to jettison the agile language in your marketing based on where they're at in their journey, let's say. So a lot of people I work with, they like me, like I used to work with Fortune 500 companies. Like I would just get emails from Fortune 500 companies being like, we need to talk to you. It was great. I thought it was going to last forever. And then mobile topped out. So what ends up happening is, a lot of times the sweet spot for a solo consultant is a client that's of a particular size, headcount wise. Depends on the industry, which heads count. So like if they have a lot of field workers, that might be, they don't count as, it's really only 10 people in management. And there's like 800 guys in trucks. But it's a lot of times around a revenue number or a head count, and those things are often correlated. So if they're doing around 10, maybe up to 50 million, and they've got maybe 150 to 250 employees, you could specialize in organizations of that size, maybe not even a sector, or you could pick a sector and say like, okay, companies of this size, they're probably going to be experiencing the kinds of growing pains that I mean, you could, if you're experienced and you've been doing this for a long time, you could almost guess what the problems they're going to be having are. And you can also spot them just by doing a LinkedIn search and connect with them, have conversations with them, hang out where they're hanging out, start to change your messaging to the pains that those specific kinds of companies have at that particular phase. Again, whether it's biotech or not, whether it's a vertical or a size, which I would almost call a demographic characteristic. But you could combine those things, but just get more specific and try and niche down into some specific pool of ideal buyers where there would be something like 2,000 to 10,000 of them in, maybe not in your area, you probably work remotely. But so the idea being that the second way is to focus your marketing on these sorts of people. And then whether or not you would shed the platform label would depend on whether or not it was still resonating with this particular group of people. Because like you said, some people don't know it's toxic. right? They're not just totally not involved with it. They kind of heard of it one time, even though it was from a book that was 20 years old or a friend who's been retired for 10 years. They're like, oh, I guess we should do this. So I think those two things, those two ways, those are the ways that I've seen people get out of a burning platform, like escape the burning platform.
The the other part of the burning platform metaphor or story
Hmm.
is that it's a burning platform in the North Sea and the
Uh-huh.
water is freezing, which makes it a very tough choice. And for a lot of the practitioners in this space, they've been comfy on the platform.
Oh yeah.
There's a PlayStation, there's heat, it's a good life.
Oh yeah. No, this
Jumping
is not
into
fun.
the freezing water, I mean, yes, cold plunges are a thing, but uh, it's not fun to jump out of the platform. It's not fun to start to see yourself, as somebody that has to. I mean, a lot of these people don't want to become consultants, and
Right.
there's a nuance on how you actually apply all of these recommendations as a W-2 employee or whatever
Yeah,
it
I
is
don't.
where you hang out. I think there's probably a thing there's probably a I start to look specifically in the sort of organizations that you talk about and not look for positions in the usual places. No, I'm not going to go and look at the other bank across the street because
Right.
what's going to happen. um, there are, I mean, another, what I see a lot of these people do is they actually go for more generic roles
Mm-hmm.
like program management.
Mm-hmm.
People that have been a scrum master a lot of time come from being a program manager, project manager in the past, so they
Right.
look back at these roles. And whether that's the right move or not, it might be a survival move for now, but it's also creating a lot of supply for those roles.
Right.
So it's a. I talk to people in the trenches, and I'm hearing some ter- some worrying stories. I mean, there's a chance that this is gonna look like the Midwest, coal towns
I don't.
after, but and that people
The
that
Dust
really
Bowl.
want to escape this reality would need to do something proactive to escape it. It's just waiting in these towns and waiting for people to continue to mine coal
Oh
is
yeah,
not
yeah.
going to help.
No.
That's, I think, the key message.
So, do you think that, speaking specifically around this example, do you think that Scrum people, in a typical scenario, Scrum people in an organization, do you think they're redundant or are they just ineffective?
It depends. Um,
Because if they're
some
redundant,
of them are redundant the way they're delivering value right now.
yeah, right. So,
Some of them, the are not delivering any value. They're just running the theater. That's more than redundant, I would say. There's some of that going on. There are
if
some great people
mhm,
that are caught along with this.
right.
Um,
So here, I guess I'm
that
thinking
that
ahead a
might
couple of years.
survive by painting a clear picture on providing evidence and language around what's
Right.
the value that we're providing.
Yes. So I'm thinking a couple years out. Let's just say like all big organizations like lay off all of their Scrum related people. I would be pretty surprised if they didn't hire after that happened. I'm not saying they'd hire the same people back, but if they clean house and they're getting rid of, if even 10% of the people they lay off were adding value and 90% weren't, they're going to probably, I would think, feel a deficiency. They're going to feel really busy. They're going to feel disorganized. I feel like I feel like there would be some downside from doing that, and the pendulum might swing back a little bit. And it'd be very interesting to know if anybody has done this already, if any companies have already jettisoned all their Scrum people, what did they hire next? Because they're going to need project managers or something, or VPEs or something. Like, they're not going
It
to have the
happened.
dev
It's
team
happened.
just. Mhm.
Yeah, it's happened in a couple of banks, to be specific.
Yeah.
Um,
But what did they hire
the
back? They hire back same people.
they hire back some of the same people to be more focused on delivery, let's call it,
Mm-hmm.
rather than improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's part of the picture. I I also see organizations that generally are taking the approach of we don't need that many people in agile roles, in enablement roles in general.
Yeah.
We need to be much more strategic in how many people we have in these roles, creating, let's call them platforms inside the organization. Product operations is an example.
Yeah. I
Product
mean, I'm not.
organizations are building a product operations capability, but they're not saying each product manager should have a product operations person next to them. That's not scalable.
Right.
The part of the issue with Agile is that it's not really scalable. Having so many people doing this, but you still need uh, the smart organizations are realizing there's some level of expertise that you need in a large organization to still do this well.
Mm-hmm.
Small organizations might not need a person on staff, but might need somebody, like me on an advisory retainer as a second opinion for doing things to drive things along instead of
Mm-hmm.
having people internally. I think part of the maybe the positive thinking around this is that this isn't the age of big consulting anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This is the age where smart organizations connect to people that have a very clear value proposition, helping them fix agile and make it something that's more of the valuable being agile organization than the theater, and they know to pick and choose who to bring into the organization, who to work with. And if you want to stay in this space, that's something I believe you really have to start. You should have started thinking about this months ago, but the best time to plant a tree was 5 years ago. The next best time is today.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or go into an be an AI transformation consultant. that's
Consultant. Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
also becoming a popular thing for agilists to do.
Is that right? Well,
Yes.
it's the next. Yeah, it's the next hype cycle, right? So
Yeah.
jump on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some sense, cynicism aside, there's some sense to that as well, because when you implement something like AI in the organization, it's not just the technology; it's organizational change management. To go back
Mm,
to your previous point, what
yeah.
do we need? How do we actually do that in an iterative way that involves people and collaborate around it? So
Right.
develop your company using product techniques is, I think, part of one of the future frontiers.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you that this is cold water to be swimming around in, but businesses have problems, and a lot of them are organizational, systemic, around managing people. So if someone genuinely has the skills behind the labels, there's probably value they can add. But to your point, it's like, but how have you been articulating that? What sort of, what would your boss point to say, oh yeah, like, you totally, it was a big, whoever, Alice completely contributed to this outcome. Agile, not agile, who cares? if Alice wasn't here, I don't know how we would have done this. Maybe there's someone else who could have done it. Who knows? Probably, maybe, who knows? But Alice did earn her salary that year, basically, is how they're thinking about it. So it's not like it's not like companies are going to let go all of their Scrum people and be like, now we have no problems. That was the last problem we had, was we were paying too many Scrum people. So there's something there, and for folks who are inside organizations, there's something there somewhere. Maybe you're not well positioned to help them with it, but it would be great to at least recognize it and say, like, okay, maybe this is the next thing I can do. Maybe, like, well, when you were VPE, and you felt like you could have a bigger impact if you were sort of operating at a more strategic level or a higher level than just managing an engineering team. And maybe that's another, in theory, for an employee. I'm trying to think like an employee now. If you noticed something internally that was a little bit higher level, maybe, or adjacent, that was like, you think was a really big problem in that organization, maybe that would be a next thing for you to do. Maybe that problem exists in lots of organizations. It probably does. So, deciding what to pivot to is like, it's kind of hard to say. It's like you're
Or
looking
at the
for,
minimum in your organization, connect to the real problems. Know what is
yeah,
the
while you can.
most expensive problem for your organization right now. Connect to working on that problem. And if you're working on that problem and you're showing traction, you have a better you have better odds of survival, I think, from what I've seen, than
Hmm.
people that are just in the periphery going through process overhead.
You just gave me a Rolodex moment, actually. Another student of mine just put together a video course that's kind of like for people in tech who are career people, about how to, I think it's called Unblock Your Career. And it's not for people who want to go out and be consultants or whatever, but I just reviewed it for him, and it's great. It's like really, really good. So for folks who are listening to this that are in the internal, W-2s or whatever, I'll put a link in the show notes to that if it's ready. I think it's ready. I think it's published. But that it's exactly it's very similar to what you just said, where it's like, talk to your manager. How could I add more value? You just talk in a way that is much more consultative, and it's going outside of your job description almost certainly. But yeah, that's very cool. I'm glad that occurred to me, because I feel bad for those folks. I don't normally think about employees, so I feel I don't want to leave people high and dry.
Every employee is a future consultant, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Not every
yeah,
one of them, but you know, it's like Hormozy helping people get to $10 million, and then they become his clients. So.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's next up, how to become a consultant. Okay, so this has been great. Do you have any closing thoughts, or is there some place people could go to find out more about what you're doing and your thinking on this subject?
Yeah, two places. One is that article about the future of agile roles and agility.
Hmm.
The other piece that I think would give people a good framing for some of the things we discussed is this new. Um, I've been playing with a private podcast thing.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, you're probably a podcast fan. So, how to this whole landscape of agile theater and feature factories and now the product operating model, what's the relationship between all of these things and how to navigate this space? And it's designed for product and engineering leaders. I think any agile practitioner would do well to start to think, from the perspective of these personas. And even if you're not a product or engineering leader, you will probably find that useful.
Yeah, that's a
We'll
great
share the
idea.
link in the show notes.
Yes, yes. Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Yuval.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time on Ditching Hourly. Bye.